This is The Data Slice, hosted by the Data Science Alliance. We sit down to talk all things data science, AI, and tech, any way you slice it. I'm Callum Hobman, and joining us today on the podcast is Zhen Zhai. I'm super excited to have you guys meet her today because we're talking all about the gaming industry, video games, and how data science and AI are playing a role in that industry. So welcome to our podcast, Jen. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you've spoken at our events in the past. You've helped us with our own projects. So we super appreciate you letting us drag you onto our podcast now. Super appreciate it. A little background on you for our friends who might not know. You're actually local or went to UC San Diego, there for graduate school with background in computer science. And then you've been at Blizzard Entertainment, working in that world as a data scientist, leading a team as well, working with search engine optimization. I know that you work with machine learning, AI, all of that in pioneering game development. So before we truly dive into your career and all the interesting things you've done, I was thinking first, could you just tell us a little more about where did your interest in that even begin? What kind of inspired you to pursue that?
Yeah, so in school, I studied computer science, and like you mentioned, and that's pretty like traditional program that people go in. I was specifically interested in machine learning, so that was a track that I picked. A couple of the intro classes were very interesting to me, so I then pursued that track. And by the end of my undergrad, one of the course that study specifically on one of the algorithm called nearest neighbor search caught my interest. And I then just studied that in depth, which then led to my grad school. By the end of my grad school, I wasn't particularly looking for gaming specific. I was pretty open on the industry that I was looking into. So I did get into search engine optimization first for a bit. Then I saw this KDD talk that was given by Blizzard Entertainment data science lead at that time, which was a long time ago. And they talked about how data science was used at Blizzard at the time. And they cover a lot of areas and cover how back in the days, data science was being helpful for the industry, for the company. And that really sparked my interest. So that was when I started looking online and they happened to be hiring. And that's how I got into gaming industry. For me, I am definitely a gamer. I play a lot of games before I joined the gaming industry. But not until I watched that talk, I didn't really have a good idea of like how data science, how what I study in machine learning is applicable in gaming. To be fair, I got into Blizzard and figured all that out while I was working there. So it's not like I have a perfect idea of what I'm going to do, going into the industry. But definitely it is a long time. Like it's been 8 years now going into gaming, looking at how data scientists was applied back then and how it evolved over time. And we're in exciting time right now.
Yeah, definitely. So you would play games. It was kind of a thing for you, but you weren't necessarily, you didn't grow up dreaming of working in the gaming industry or anything. Wow.
Actually not.
So what's it like to kind of now look back? It was kind of a thing for you playing games, but now you're really in it. What is it like? Would you believe it if you told your past self what you'd be doing?
I think it will be pretty surprising because back then, I don't think the way that we're using machine learning and AI for gaming is the same as now. A lot of technology have been evolved and improved and changed. A lot of new research have came out, which then inspire a lot of new ways of us using machine learning and AI for gaming.
I know you said, so it's been a little chunk of time at Blizzard. So how have you kind of seen, obviously you are a data scientist at Blizzard, but how have you seen even, your own role kind of change and grow over the years?
Yeah, I would say when we first started, a lot of it was what we now call traditional machine learning. So a lot of it is on regression modeling, clustering, more of the traditional ML, supervised and supervised learning and all of that. Recently, I wouldn't say recently, probably recent 5 years, things have shifted more focus on advanced ML, advanced machine learning, things like reinforcement learning, things like doing computer graphics, and things like also some traditional one like deep learning in recommendation algorithm and all of that have now taken majority part of my work and my team's work. that's definitely a change from the past and now. And I definitely see all of those domains in gaming industry thriving as we move on because a lot more applications are coming in that we see, oh, yes, we can use that technology to solve this all kind of problems that we're seeing now. So it's definitely different.
Very interesting, to look back on even just recent times. Like you said, we're talking even just 5 years difference, which is kind of crazy to think. So I know you kind of just touched on it a little bit, but could you tell us just a little more about just kind of your role? What does it really mean when you say you're a data scientist at a gaming company?
I think when we're looking at data science for gaming, it probably will be different per game company. But from my experience and from my role at Blizzard specifically, we focus on leveraging machine learning and AI kind of technology and solution and algorithms to help game development, to help in-game features, to help game balancing, and just help players have a good time in our games.
Yeah, so what is that like to use data to kind of enhance or improve the user experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll give you one example where Hearthstone, which is one of our game, that's a card game. And when we first had that game made, people coming into the game looking at, I don't know, like hundreds of cards that we have, we're just not sure where to start. We do have a lot of data that we collected at how players are playing our games at the time, meaning that we do know the advanced player or player who already know how to play that game. How do they use their card to make a deck, and how do they use that deck then play with other players? So we have all those data, then we leverage that data to have an algorithm to learn of, how are players playing our games at this point? And then use that algorithm, then recommend for new player, here are a deck you can play. If you have no idea where to start, here's an easy start. That makes sure that the recommendation that we make is not just completely random. It's relevant because we're using at the time what players are playing. As we release new feature, the playstyle will change. The algorithm will be able to catch up to how players are playing. So when new players join, whenever they join, they will be able to have a recommendation that match how people are playing the game at that point. In this way, we allow a new player to come in easily. They'll be able to have a good time coming in, smooth entry point, won't have such a difficult time to try to read all the cards, understand what they mean. That is definitely one example that we released for that game.
Kind of more personalized in a way, going off of real users and their experiences versus what you think might work,
Exactly, yes.
Interesting. And so is the data that you're using collected through the games? Is it all player data, or are there kind of specific types of data that are most useful for that?
So it depends on what we're trying to build. So for that feature specifically, it's actually called Smart Deck feature for Hearthstone. That when we collect what decks specifically players are using, that's all, because we only need to know how people are using the cards to make a deck, and then they use that deck to play, right? So all we need is what people are playing, what cards they're selecting, what do they have in their deck, and do they enjoy playing that deck? Is that deck strong enough for the current play style? So only that specific information that we need to collect for this feature, and depends on what we are looking at for other algorithms and other things, we will collect different data to support the algorithm.
Okay. Are there types of communications that you have with players when it is data being pulled from games that they're playing?
Yes. So like for that feature, we actually back then written a blog specifically telling how that was built. I think that one is to introduce player of, look, this is a game feature that we launched that you can use. Another thing is player will be beneficial for them to understand what we are using their data for and how we're building things from that. And also for the new player who come in, when they're using that feature, some of them really want to know how we build it. They want to know the algorithm behind it. They want to know what's running behind this feature. They go to the blog post and be able to see how our data scientists kind of build it, what data we collected, how we use it, and so on.
Yeah, that's fair. As a gamer, that you kind of, it's interesting, it's very interesting. Are there any steps that are taken to ensure players' privacy and things like that are protected and the data is kind of used ethically too?
Yeah, so for that example, right, we're only collecting decks and we don't really need to know who's doing what, right? So we are looking at our player in a cohort of how they're playing aggregately. It's not that, oh, you are playing it this way, that we should have another player play like you. It's less on individual level. We do definitely look at the player in the grand scheme of things and look at the cohort of, oh, this giant cohort of player play in this style, they really enjoyed it. That may be a better recommendation than this one individual who's playing something and enjoy it. So for all of those data, it's completely anonymous. We don't even know who's doing what. We just look at the cohort level of things.
Makes sense. Do you think that type of information that you're able to pull from that data, kind of that analysis, has allowed not just better experiences, but just kind of new experiences too?
Yes, it's good that you got into that point, because for that algorithm that we use to support recommending card and deck for new player, we also have designer use it to balance the game. Imagine that designer will be able to design new cards that put into the game without knowing how one individual card or how one set of individual cards will impact the overall balance of the game. Because that algorithm collect data and look at how players are playing things. So if, say, we release something that is overpowered, right, that is not fair for the rest of the deck that we already have in the system, that algorithm will be able to alert our designer of like, oh, hey, this card coming in may change the balance in a way that you may not want. Designer will be able to react to it quickly, right? They will come in and they're able to tune things a little bit to make sure new information, new feature coming to the game is still make sure the whole game is balanced.
Are there specific teams that you work the most with? You know, once your data science team does your data analysis and all of that, is there a specific team that you work the most with or that you then pass your information off to?
Yeah, we work with all kind of development team, including our software engineer, artists, designer, tech artists, all of them, because based on what we're working on, we definitely work with the people who make the game to help them understand how they can make it better.
As someone who has played games for a long time and, you know, plays games, I'm sure still, has there ever been a moment as a player, you know, not in your role, but as an actual gamer, where you've maybe noticed a game that you're playing that where you're kind of like, wow, this is so cool, or such a new, you know, part of the game that you kind of recognize as something that data probably helped create?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when I go into a game and if I go into a level that I help, you know, supply data for and help them balance it out, or going to the maps that our computer graphics team have helped, I'll be like, oh yes, I recognize this. I help with this.
I
This
know
is
that.
great. Yes, that's definitely a good and accomplishing feeling for sure.
Yeah, you kind of get to see what the users experience as well. Well, I know the gaming industry is a popular industry and it sounds cool and exciting. Lots of the DSA community are students who are interested in your industry. Do you have advice for them? You know, anything you maybe wish you knew or had done when you were in college before entering your career officially?
Yeah, I would say the gaming industry and how machine learning have been used in the gaming industry have always been evolving, but the fundamental knowledge of machine learning, it's always applicable, right? The foundation is always important for us to be able to be innovative on how things are being used. So definitely make sure that all those fundamental knowledge classes that school teaches, you have a thorough understanding of it. I know a lot of the time when I was taking that class, I'm like, I have no idea how those will be applicable. But trust me, you will see how all of that now is connected to all the solution we're building into whatever industry that you're going into, and specifically in gaming. Also, I think trying to read like a lot of the blog posts that we do show you how we've been using it nowadays, using machine learning and AI to help game development and game industry. That definitely catch up on that to have a sense of, oh, I learned this in school. oh, that's how it's being used right now. 2 years later, maybe things are different, So catch up on that. That's something that people can do when you're in free time, read some blog posts. A lot of the game industry have research labs that publish blogs, newsletter, and all of that. I read those too, to understand how game industry as a whole have been using machine learning to help with different games that studios are making. Those are also pretty helpful.
Well, looking at the gaming industry as a whole, either from your perspective as a working professional or maybe just as a gamer too, are there any recent trends or maybe innovations or changes that you're feeling extra excited about that you're noticing?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important where, Data Science Alliance is working on as well is how to find a way to implement and integrate responsible AI into everything that we do, right? And this is not just for gaming industry. I think it's for all industry as a whole. No matter what we are using the machine learning and AI technology to solve, we need to find a way to really think about at the forefront, how do we do it responsibly? And a lot of the time we will need help to, for example, evaluate, right? Measure fairness. How can we make sure transparency? How can we make sure trustworthiness? And all of that, I'm really excited to see the research community are honing into as we speak to look at what are some standard methodology, principles that people find helpful. They'll publish blog posts, publish papers on it. That's something that I'm really keeping a close eye on, is to make sure that whenever something that come out that be like, oh, yes, we should do this for all of our thing, we can then take and adopt it for our practice. I'm very excited on all the work that's happening in that domain. I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's definitely a growing topic, for sure, more and more. Yes. I know you mentioned fairness. Could you talk a little more about what that looks like in the gaming industry? I think maybe transparency, that's a little more obvious to people who don't know the industry, but what are some ways that we can be fair, when using data in gaming?
Good question. So I'll give you an example of our matchmaking. If we're designing our matchmaking using data, right? And a lot of time when you're looking at data as a whole, you have majority of the player and you have minority of the player. People who are either really good that could either go into esport, or people who just come into the game not sure what they're doing and brand new. For us to make sure we use the data fairly, we can't just look at data as a whole, because that means the people who are majority will take advantage and we will have to tune our algorithm for them. We can't do that. We want to make sure we cover all grounds. We want to make sure that we look at all kinds of players, right? No matter their skill level, make sure the matchmaking algorithm that we design, it's fair for all of them. Make sure they have a fair match coming in. They enjoy their gameplay no matter what level you're at.
So it's that skill level. That makes sense that you're not catering to just the people that play all the time.
That's
really
right.
Good. And I know you mentioned trustworthiness. Are there specific things that help build trust between the player and developers, you think?
Yes, I'll go back to our Hearthstone example. When we first developed the feature, a lot of the time we would think that's how people and players will want to use things and want to play the game. We listen in on player feedback after we launch something new. We launched a feature of Smart Deck and try to see how players are using it. And then we collect feedback, we collect more data, and then hone in and tune on top of it, right? It's not that, oh, we let this out, great. We don't do that. A lot of time we listen and we make sure that we take the feedback and we iterate on it, because that's how you build trust. It's when people are using something in the game and they're like, oh, I like it because of this, where I don't like it because of that. If we just ignore the don't like it part, people will stop using it and they'll lose trust in what we build and are we building it for the players, right? So a lot of that is through iteration, collecting more data to hone in on the problem that people are raising. And all of that is how we gradually build trust.
Yeah, I know, that makes sense. It feels like they're seeing the improvements and they can trust you to make those improvements and better the game.
Yes.
Obviously, a lot is changing and growing in the industry. And I know we talked about how lots of students are really interested. So what is it like for someone who is several years into their career at this point? What is it like to see students kind of come in, especially as the tech evolves and they probably are growing up on games much different from older games that we grew up on.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it like to kind of see that next generation of game developers or game designers kind of come in with fresh ideas and all of that?
Oh, it's great. It's great. Definitely have a lot of people come in with new ideas, not just on game development. And also we have a lot of new data scientists joining the team and telling us how they think machine learning and AI can be used for game development. We love those new ideas. I think that is based on the foundation of what they learn in school and their creativity, right? Every people have different experience with gaming. They play different games. They learn different things in school. They focus on, like we mentioned, either art, design, or engineering. They come in, they have their own idea of, I think this is how we should use this technology to solve that problem. That's what makes an industry thriving on the creativity, innovation coming from the new generation. So it's great, fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Of
It's
course.
so interesting to hear, the data science side of things. I feel like people don't always think about, what is gaming data and how does it help enhance their experiences and all of that. But lots of us play games. So super appreciate it. And we'll have to keep an eye on the industry. We'll bring you back in another 5 years. Who knows where gaming will be? We'll all be holograms or something by then. But thank you so much. We always love having you at DSA. So thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and share it with a friend. And don't forget, the Data Science Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit that you can support. You can do a donation, become a member, volunteer with us, or attend our events. We have lots going on all the time here at our location in San Diego, California. Even if you don't live in San Diego, though, lots of ways to get involved. So go to our website, datasciencealliance.org, to get involved. Otherwise, we'll see you here next time on The Data Slice.